Unter dem Kindswigele steht a chlorweiß Ziegele. Das Ziegel ist gefallen.
Women musicians. What did Jewish community leaders have to say about women making music before the modern period? Check out these two quotes.
Consort not with a female musician, lest thou be taken in by her snares. 3 things can restore a man's good spirits: sound, sight, and smell. Sound refers to music or the sweet voice of a woman.
On the one hand, women were reviled by male authority figures as dangerous and destabilizing. On the other hand, they were praised as a source of inspiration and beauty. There is evidence that in ancient Israel, skilled women musicians organized dances and parades to celebrate military victories. After the defeat of the Egyptian army at the Sea of Reeds, Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, took a drum and led the Israelite women in song and dance. Then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a drum in her hand, and all the women followed her with drums and dancing. Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea." When Jephthah returned from his battle against the Ammonites, his daughter came out to greet him with the traditional festivities. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mitzpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of hand drums? In the ancient Middle East and beyond, funeral music was also a woman's occupation. Anyone arranging for a burial was expected to hire one or more women who had been trained in the arts of wailing, miyalelot, and singing lamentations, mekonenot. Some dirges were even accompanied with flutes and or drums. Consider now, call for the wailing women to come, send for the most skillful of them. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Rabbi Judah says, for her burial, even the poorest in Israel should hire not less than 2 flutes and 1 wailing woman. There is also evidence that there were female entertainers at the royal court in ancient Israel. Jewish tradition attributes the following passage to King Solomon, although its redacted form might be the product of the 3rd century BCE. I further amassed silver and gold and treasures of kings and provinces, and I got myself male and female singers. Among the servants of the wealthy Israelites returning in 538 BCE from their exile in Babylon were hundreds of male and female singers. In addition to their 7,337 servants and maids, there were 200 male and female singers. While music in the central sanctuary, the temple in Jerusalem, was largely in the hands of the men of the tribe of Levi, the Bible provides a few tantalizing hints about possible female participation in liturgical functions. In front are the singers, after them the instrumentalists. With them are the maidens playing hand drums. And God gave to Haman 14 sons and 3 daughters. All these were under the charge of their father for the singing in the house of the Lord, to the accompaniment of cymbals, harps, and lyres. Apparently, the voices of women were heard loud and clear in at least one ancient Jewish sect. Philo, a Jew living in Alexandria, Egypt in the first decades of the Christian era, offers us a glimpse of the egalitarian musical practices of the Therapeutae. And after the feast, they celebrate the sacred festival during the whole night. Two choruses are formed at first, one of men and the other of women. Then they sing hymns which have been composed in honor of God. Then they join together, and the two become one chorus, an imitation of the chorus which many years ago was established by the Red Sea. When the Israelites saw and experienced that great miracle, both men and women together, under the influence of divine inspiration, became all one chorus, and sang hymns of thanksgiving to God the Savior. Moses the prophet led the men, and Miriam the prophetess led the women. Now this chorus of male and female worshippers being formed, as far as possible on this model of Moses and Miriam, makes a most pleasant concert and a truly musical symphony, the treble voices of the women mingling with the deep-toned voices of the men. In mainstream rabbinic Judaism, for centuries the voices of women were censored. In these male-dominated societies, female singers were considered to be dangerously seductive, with siren-like powers to distract men from their proper pursuits. Rabbi Joseph said, "When men sing and women join in, it is licentiousness. When women sing and men join in, it is even worse, like a fire raging in flax." What would distract a man from his prayers? Samuel said, "A woman's voice is sexual incitement." The Talmudic proscriptions were maintained for centuries. The 13th century Rabbi Moses Maimonides warned, "It is forbidden to listen to the voice of a forbidden woman or to gaze upon her hair." Similar restrictions were instituted in Christian churches. Paul of Tarsus instructed, "Women are to remain quiet at meetings. It does not seem right for a woman to raise her voice." In the 5th century, the bishop Hippolytus wrote, "A woman who attracts people with her beautiful but deluding sweetness of voice, which is full of seduction to sin, must give up her trade and wait 40 days if she is to receive communion." Until recently, choirs in Catholic churches were comprised exclusively of men and or boys. Note that the designations for treble voices are all male gender nouns. Latin nouns ending with us, like cantus, and Italian ending with o, soprano, canto, alto, not soprana, alta. And Pope Pius X reaffirmed this principle in his motu proprio of November 1903, saying, "Women cannot be admitted to form part of the choir." But the rabbinic restrictions did not totally silence Jewish women. In the Rhineland, in the town of Worms, a group of women had their own chapel adjoining the men's synagogue. The tombstone of a woman who died in the 13th century reads as follows. This headstone commemorates the eminent and excellent Lady Orania, daughter of Rabbi Abraham, the leader of the synagogue singers, whose praying was magnificent. She also officiated with a musical voice and sang hymns before the female worshippers. In a separate program, Judy Panolis will teach us more about these early women prayer leaders and subsequent developments. If women could not sing in the presence of men, they sang to themselves, to their children, and to one another. Group singing by women was supposed to be confined to gatherings from which men were excluded. In various Jewish communities, when a young woman was about to be married, the women of her town convened special ritual celebrations, which served the function of educating the bride and relieving some of the prenuptial jitters. Professional singers, accompanied by various drums, performed the traditional repertoire. In Yemen, henna songs were sung as the bride-to-be was painted with a brightly colored paste and dressed in a lavish costume. Folk songs arise in association with the activities of daily life. So it is not surprising that in societies where men's and women's occupations are segregated, we find a segregation of musical repertoires as well. Women's songs revolved around homebound tasks, such as child-rearing. However, we should point that musicologist Ellen Koskoff notes that a society's gender structure is based not only on the obvious biological differences that allow women and not men to bear and nurture children, equally important, she says, are culturally conceived notions of masculine and feminine activities. Often alone at home, some women sang to relieve boredom and to express pent-up emotions. Songs were a means by which women could express ideas that were culturally taboo. Among the women of Eastern Europe, there is a repertory of lamentations, the sad songs of the bride forced into an arranged marriage and pining for her true love.
In Droyzen ist finster, in Droyzen ist finster, sich spät bei Nacht. Men hört kein Schum, kein Schott, kein Vigele fliehen auf der Gas. Men hört kein Schum, kein Schott, kein Vigele fliehen auf der Gas. Bist du gefällt?
Mothers singing to their babies with no one else in the room would express their aspirations for the child's future.
Unter dem Kindswigele steht a chlorweiß Ziegele. Das Ziegel ist gefahren handeln, Roschenkes mit Mandeln, ich sehe sie's, mein Kind wird sein gesund und frisch. Gesund ist die beste Scheure, mein Kind wird lernen teure wird lernen, Sforim wird schreiben, a guter und frommer Jid wird im Herzen verbleiben.
Romanceros were popular among the Jewish women in Sephardic communities. Some of these songs expressed a fantasy about running away to a more exciting life.
Oh,
There were also periods in which Jews achieved wealth and status, allowing leisure time for indulging in the arts of the surrounding superculture. There are several accounts of Jewish women entering the field of secular music during the late Renaissance. Madama Europa, sister of the renowned composer Salomone Rossi Hebreo, was an accomplished soprano who performed in Monteverdi's operas at the court of the Gonzagas in Mantua in the first decade of the 17th century. In 17th century Antwerp, Leonora Duarte, a viol player descendant of Portuguese Jews, composed a set of 6 symphonies. Harriett Abrams, a late 18th century English composer and soprano, was a featured soloist at fashionable London concerts. In an upcoming program, Professor Rebecca Cyprus will tell us all about the Jewish women who hosted musical salons in Europe. After the Emancipation, more and more Jews in Western Europe began to live a lifestyle more consonant with that of their Christian neighbors. While some abandoned their ancestral faith, In an attempt to be fully integrated into Christian society, others sought to modernize Jewish practice. In the 19th century, some synagogues introduced the innovation of men and women singing together in choirs. These innovations were considered shocking by traditional Jews and did not pass unopposed. In 1819, the Hamburg rabbinical court decreed, "They continue to do evil. At the dedication of their house of prayer, men and women sang together at the opening of the ark, in contradiction to the law set out in the Talmud and in the codes. A woman's voice is indecent." In 1899, the first Jewish secular choral society, Zamir, a mixed ensemble, was founded in Lodz, Poland. Their first conductor, Joseph Rumshinsky, recalled in his memoirs the strong opposition the fledgling ensemble faced. "The Hasidic Jews condemned us in principle, saying, 'Gewalt! Young men and women singing together!'" In the 1870s, Avraham Goldfaden created what he claimed was the first Jewish theater company. His troupe of actors-singers, which eventually included women, was received enthusiastically as it toured throughout Europe and eventually in the United States. One of Goldfaden's singer-actors, Sophie Carp, became a well-known stage personality. In 1896, she introduced Peretz Sandler's sacred aria, Eli, Eli. In 1918, Boris Tomaszewski produced a new comedy called Die Chazante, The Lady Cantor, starring Regina Prager, another of Goldfaden's protégés. In Tomaszewski's production, the idea of a lady cantor was a spoof, but in another 6 decades, it would become a reality. In 1976, Reform Judaism's School of Sacred Music ordained its first female cantor, and 11 years later, the conservative movement's Cantors Institute followed suit. Stay tuned for 2 more chapters in this series. Rebecca Sipus on the European Jewish women's musical salons, and Judy Panolis on female liturgical singers. And of course, throughout the year, look for our performances and conversations with composers and conductors. We hope that you are enjoying Zamir's year-long initiative on Kolot Nashim, Women in Jewish Music.